As you know, the apostolic constitution, which provides for groups of Anglicans to enter into corporate union with the Catholic Church, was issued by our Holy Father in November of 2009. Specifically, Anglicanorum Coetibus allows for the erection of personal ordinariates. They are very similar juridically to a diocese, and in this ordinariate, the elements of Anglican patrimony, heritage, would be maintained. On March 23, 2010, I gave a report to the Administrative Committee of the USCCB, and subsequent to that report and the questions that were asked by bishops of the Administrative Committee, we compiled a summary, and then with that was a report put together by the senior staff of our conference. All of that was helpful in communicating to the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith what the thoughts were of our conference. And that discussion took place April 26th through the 29th of 2010 at the Congregation. On August the 22nd, 2010, Father Scott Hurd, a priest of the Archdiocese of Washington and a pastoral provision priest, joined the staff on this effort now for the implementation. He was also appointed liaison with the USCCB so that we would have continuous contact with the offices here. The USCCB made a public announcement in September 2010 in which Anglicans wishing to approach this ordinariate, proposed ordinariate, wishing to be received into the church using this mechanism, were invited to express their mind, express their intentions by writing by the end of the year. And we received a significant number of letters, emails, calls. Since that time, every Anglican group or individual who has written has received an acknowledgement, and for those groups, they received a community profile questionnaire. They were asked to fill this out so that we, the committee, would have material to indicate what exactly is the nature of this community seeking to become a part of an ordinariate. For individual Anglican clergy, we sent a clergy profile questionnaire. On January of this year, an overview and a summary of all that material that we collected concerning individual groups and concerning those ordained Anglican clergymen. All of that was put together, and we presented that to the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. A modified version of it was presented also to the conference, to our president, who then shared it with all of the members of the conference. And in both reports, the one to the Holy See and the one to all of us here at the conference, we made the assessment that it appears feasible that an ordinariate for the United States would in fact be workable. Shortly thereafter, an extensive assessment of those Anglican communities intending, asking, requesting to come into an ordinariate was then sent off to CDF. We went through all of the material that we received back from each one of those communities, and we prepared as best we could a report to the Holy See. In the report, I explained that all bishops that would come into this group, all of them requesting to come into this group, would have to submit by May 1st any information that they wished to share with us. And then I wrote to every bishop who had an Anglican community, as far as we knew from the address they gave us, any one of our bishops who had an Anglican community in your diocese, we wrote to you and said, if you have any observations, anything you want to say about this group, please let us know. And you can imagine the range of answers went from never heard of them to, oh, this is a group we've worked with for a long time, and this is a group that we have some familiarity with. An analysis of the academic and ministerial formation history of all of those Anglicans petitioning for admission into a proposed ordinariate, all of this was submitted to the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith in April. This was done to evaluate the formation needs for Catholic ordination. And in our analysis, we proposed to the congregation that petitioning Anglican clergy be placed in one of three categories, based on everything that we were able to determine from what they sent us about their history, their formation, and their background. We said they fall into three categories. The first category was those who would be eligible for what the Holy See implemented in England, and that is the intense formation period. We would be able relatively quickly, in an intense formation period, to ordain these Anglican clergy as priests, using as the model a formation program that would concentrate on the areas of historic divergence. There's an assumption that many of the things we share in common, we truly do share in common, like the nature of baptism, the idea of the risen Lord. But there are areas of historic divergence, and those became the focus for the formation program. And we determined that there was a large group that would fit into what we called Category 1, well-formed, with a consistent theological background. They would need to focus and concentrate on these areas of divergence. That could be done in a relatively short period of time, in contrast, say, with the pastoral provision. It could be done within a 9-month period. The second group was the group that we determined required sustained formation. This would mean that they would take the intensive formation period and then an obligatory continuation in a continuing formation program that would be verified. The third category were those whose histories we thought really did not recommend them for either of those other options. In planning then for the implementation of Anglicanorum Coetibus, this program of priestly formation was developed, and it would allow for this concentration of studies in the area of theological divergence. The Holy See approved the program and authorized its use. So where we are right now is we have a program of priestly formation approved by the Holy See that can be implemented for the formation of these people coming into an ordinariate once an ordinariate is established and these men are approved for entrance into the formation program. With the encouragement of Cardinal Daniel DiNardo, the leadership of the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston's major seminary, St. Mary's, agreed to implement this priestly formation program. And Your Eminence, we're very, very grateful for your assistance in helping this happen. Father Jeffrey Steenson, who is on the platform, whom I just introduced, has been instrumental in helping to design the special elements of this program since he is on the faculty of the seminary. And he himself is the former Episcopal Bishop of the Diocese of Rio Grande and who was received into the church in 2007. The formation program will provide either on-site or through distance learning the capability of any person who is going to be ordained a Catholic priest to receive this basic remedial in terms of the areas of divergence formation. In mid-April, Anglican clergy seeking ordination in the ordinariate were directed as part of the process to submit a dossier. We sent them the list that the Holy See said would have to be complete in preparing a dossier that would go to CDF. And we asked them to submit that so that we could prepare to transmit those. As soon as this consultation is done, and depending on how well all of this goes, these dossiers will be sent by the end of this week to Rome, to the appropriate dicastery, to the congregation. Those Anglican clergy whose dossier are granted a nulla osta by the congregation, once the congregation receives these, and it has reserved to itself the right to make a determination. If it grants a nulla osta, indicating that these men are eligible to proceed with the approved priestly formation program, they will be directed to provide additional information, because now we're going to get into some personal information. But once it's clear that the Holy See has said these men have what it takes now to proceed, they will then be asked to provide information, including the results of a criminal background check, psychological evaluations, a letter of resignation from their Anglican entity, a votum from either the delegate or the ordinary of the ordinariate if it's been established, and a votum from the local Catholic bishop. The votum will be whatever you indicate you would like to say. I have some idea of who this is. I have very little idea, but here is my thought on this. If possible, we are also going to try to have a votum from the candidate's former Anglican authority under whom he worked. During this time, those candidates responsible for a congregation will be guiding the catechetical formation of that congregation. The goal is to bring that entire congregation into the Catholic Church, and that they will be adequately catechized. The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith has determined that our text, the text here of this conference, the United States Catholic Catechism for Adults, would be the guiding text for the catechesis of those who are members of these various congregations. And candidates will be encouraged to invite speakers from the local church, local parishes, Catholic parishes, to assist in that catechesis. This is an area where I think we can be generously assistive to our Anglican brothers and sisters who are seeking to come into this ordinariate. A parish or a congregation or a community that needs catechetical assistance, if we're able to say, well, there's a DRE at the neighboring parish who would be willing to come in and work with you, or there's someone from our archdiocesan or diocesan office who would be willing to come in and help you with this catechetical period, that would be a great blessing to the small congregations that are seeking to be adequately catechized. Once this second set of documents has been sent to CDF, a candidate will cease celebrating Anglican Eucharist. Once this second set of documents indicating the psychological testing, indicating the background check, once that's gone off, the presumption is that this person is going to be invited into the formation program and therefore should cease functioning sacramentally as an Anglican. When a rescript has been received, once it's been issued by the congregation and received, this candidate will be ordained to the diaconate immediately, with the intention that his subsequent priestly ordination will coincide with the reception of his community into the church. The reason for a diaconal ordination was he would be able to continue as a deacon to lead that community through the rest of its catechetical formation and preparation. Since the Holy See has indicated its wish to establish an ordinariate in the United States this fall, I'm grateful for this opportunity to conduct this consultation with you, with all the members of our conference, to receive any additional observations you might have. I'm very grateful that this is the third time that I've had a chance to speak to the bishops collectively it's very, very helpful in preparing these reports that we send off to the congregation. Before inviting your observations, and I hope your support for this effort, I'd like to touch on just a few areas where individually, you and I, as diocesan bishops, can be of assistance to this newly formed ordinariate and its efforts to review possible candidates for priestly ordination. Since each candidate is going to have a criminal background check, just as all of ours do, and a psychological evaluation, just like all of our candidates do, I would hope that each of us would be able to provide these services to a candidate for the ordinariate, just as we do for our own men seeking admission into a priestly formation program or to minister in the diocese. If there's going to be one ordinariate across the entire United States, and this large number of potential candidates for the priesthood coming into the ordinariate, it seems to me the best way to ensure that there is an adequate background check and adequate psychological testing is to simply have that person do it in the diocese where that person is now residing. And it would be our small gift, our small contribution to the effort. A second area where we can perhaps be of some assistance is to offer worship space to a small community that would be coming into the ordinariate. Most of them will not have property. Such is the nature of these congregations coming in. If you leave a body, the property stays with the larger body. It would be one way in which we could be welcoming if we had space to allow them to conduct their worship, their Mass, according to the tradition that's recognized by this ordinariate. Our hospitality would provide them worship space, but it would be a sign of our generosity as well. One additional area that we can facilitate the work of the ordinariate would be perhaps to assign a priest, one of your priests, to be your delegate, so that the delegate could meet and interview these candidates, so that you would have some firsthand knowledge of who it is that's coming in to this ordinariate. And perhaps that person might even be willing to serve as a mentor once the person is ordained and is functioning within an Anglican tradition parish. Fourth, I would suggest that we could also make as a resource available to these candidates our tribunals. Some of them are going to have to address the question of annulment before being received into the ordinariate. And one final area that I already touched on, where collaboration at the local level would be helpful, would be catechetical preparation. The lay members of the parishes, of these communities, of these congregations, would be coming into the church. They will be using our catechism, and if we're able to assist them in that process, I think it could be a blessing both for them and for us. It might also be helpful to note that the establishment of an ordinariate and the process for the pastoral provision are two distinct responses. The ordinariate deals with those seeking to come in as a group. The pastoral process, the pastoral provision, is intended for an individual who wants to come in and be ordained a priest. Those are the basic elements of the process as it's unfolding and where we would go as an ordinariate. I'm very grateful for the opportunity today to have this consultation with you. Archbishop, I would attempt to answer any questions if there are any.
Excellent. I would anticipate some. Cardinal Wuerl, thank you for your characteristic thoroughness and attention to this issue. Thank you very much. Observations, questions? Bishop Gaynor, followed by Cardinal George. I'm sorry. It's not Bishop Gaynor. It's, please, Bishop. Yeah, it's Bishop Herzog, sure. Please,
Thank you.
Bishop, followed by Cardinal George.
When you were outlining the steps, there was nothing mentioned about receiving someone into the Catholic community, which is clearly a part of the pastoral provision. Is that in fact a difference? That if they're going to be a part of an ordinariate, they do not formally come into the church?
No, thank you for raising that. No, they do. Not only do they have to make a profession of faith and eventually be confirmed, they have to make a written declaration that they intend to come into the Catholic Church. It's their intention as a laywoman or a layman to come into the Catholic Church, and that has to be in writing.
Thank you, Bishop Herzog. Cardinal George, followed by Bishop Baker.
Thank you, Cardinal Wuerl, and the bishops that are with you on this committee for the thorough way in which this is being done and explained. There are two areas that I would just like to question or ask you to explain. The reason, or one of them, for creating a structure that is an ordinariate is to preserve elements that are distinctively Anglican in a spiritual or patristic or liturgical heritage. I'm not sure I've ever seen an explanation as to what those elements might be, because, in fact, the liturgy is now using the Roman canon, etc. And I just wonder if, in your experience, how is this talked about, and what do they tell you that they're really anxious to preserve? Because in the end, this is designed to enrich Catholic communion, to enrich us all. So without great detail, could you try to outline a little bit of what is the richness of the Anglican heritage, which will now be ours too as part of Catholic communion, but how do they think about it or look about it? And the second question is more pastoral. Inevitably, it seems to me, over the course of years, people who were born and raised in the Roman Catholic Church might be attracted to this particular group. Right now, they're not candidates to be part of this ordinariate. How will this be handled pastorally? It's not like an Eastern Church. It comes out of our own Catholic communion in Latin Church. And is there any forethought given to this? Because I suspect it might become a pastoral dilemma at certain points.
Thank you, Your Eminence. Beginning with the second of the two questions, the Constitution has been very, very clear that this is intended for those who are Anglican now. And it is not intended to be an instrument by which others who might have some other reason for disassociation with us would use to come in. And it's also intended, as it moves forward, to be much more identified with the Latin Rite. For example, it's only the first generation that will have married clergy. It's intended that in the second generation, the presumption would be that candidates for the priesthood coming up out of this community would be celibate. The provision is made for an ad hoc petition to the Holy See, but the assumption is that the second generation would be celibate. In terms of your first question, identifying the elements of the Anglican tradition, we have talked about that at great length because it's liturgical. Some of it has to do with the very history as they see their way of participating in the life of the church. But you're right, a lot of that is probably, the actual liturgical expression is probably going to be less and less accentuated as the time goes on, because many of them already use as the missal at Mass, they will use the Roman Missal, or at least some of them. The Anglican use parishes use the Book of Divine Worship, so will all of these. But there is not as clearly defined a body of elements that constitute a universally agreed upon Anglican tradition that's being preserved in each of these. Father Steenson, is that fair enough? I look to Father Steenson because he, coming out of that tradition, is the one we have asked consistently for assistance. But Your Eminence, you touch on something that was a part of the discussions even during the early days of this in Rome.
Bishop Baker, followed by Cardinal DiNardo.
Cardinal Wuerl, thank you very much for taking on this historic and challenging task for the American Church. We're very, very grateful. Just following up on Cardinal George's question about the status of individuals coming in, could you clarify those who are obviously Anglican now, Episcopalian, but had left the Catholic Church to enter previously? In other words, and now they are wishing to return, do they fall into your third category of those probably not being able to be part of this effort?
Thank you, Bishop Baker. For clergy, they're automatically excluded.
They're excluded.
Constitution excludes a former priest.
Gotcha.
Former Catholic priest cannot apply for the Anglican usage, cannot apply for this ordinariate.
If they were Catholic originally. And then a second question, and this actually doesn't apply directly to what you're doing now, but just the experience I've had, and I know other bishops as well, that many of the people who come to us from other denominations, Christian denominations, have a similar interest. We know that the Roman Catholic Church is not reaching out in the same way as to the Episcopal denomination, but isn't there a need for us as bishops to have a pastoral sensitivity to them somehow, somewhere? We don't have actually a way to do that now. I don't know whether it's going to come through your committee, but I just lay that on before the brother bishops that many have come to us wanting to be assisted, not necessarily come in as clergy, but just to be assisted. And do we have a mechanism for that?
Thank you. Thank you. If I might make just one comment on the uniqueness of this Anglican provision, it grows out of the dialogues going all the way back to Pope Paul VI and Archbishop Ramsey. Following the council, the initial dialogues, the initial discussions were all about corporate reunion. That was the plan. The idea was that there would be a corporate reunion between the Anglican Communion and the Catholic Church. That has moved along in its at its own speed, although I was interested to see that recently the next level of dialogue has been reintroduced. The fourth of the series of dialogues in the Archic has been reintroduced. That's, Bishop, that's really the foundation for this idea of communal group entry. It's Pope Benedict XVI has indicated that he sees this as a continuation of that initial effort.
Cardinal DiNardo, then Bishop Ramirez.
Cardinal Wuerl, thank you very much and your committee for your work. This is delicate. I just wanted to reemphasize what you mentioned in your own presentation, that in the course of the last few months, St. Mary's Seminary in Houston, Texas, has expressed with the Archdiocese our willingness to help in the formation of those clergy who are prepared enough to enter into preparation for the priesthood. And it will be done through St. Mary's Seminary and through the good graces of the direction of Father Steenson, who I think has prepared a very fine, along with others, outline of the kind of formation that will be necessary. I think part of the reason for that is up till now, a number of those expressing desires to come into communion with Rome have come from the area of Texas, and I think Texas becomes therefore a kind of backdrop. We already have nearby the seminary one Anglican rite usage parish that is 27 years old, so it has a great record of dealing with Anglican rite usage. I would like to make one further comment, Cardinal, that this initial formation is going to be strategically important, and it's a bit intense and is needful. But given the fact that many of the clergy coming in, though enthusiastic and I think genuine, lack a certain amount of ecclesial savoir-faire and whatnot, the ongoing formation that is planned, to my mind, is equally crucial. And that will be the real payoff as to whether this is going to be purely a liturgical group coming in, or this is going to be a group for evangelization of the world using this important dimension of Anglican rite usage. And to my mind, it remains to be seen if that can happen, but I think that's the Holy See's hope in all of this. And St. Mary's Seminary would want to be cooperative in anything that relates to that. That's it.
Your Eminence, thank you. Thank you so very, very much for your collaboration in this and your openness to this from the very beginning. And that point you make is so, so important. There's the period of intense formation that can lead to ordination, but then there's the ongoing formation. We expect that of our own priests today, but it would be absolutely essential, and it would be required. It would be a required element. Thank you.
Bishop Ramirez and Bishop Conlon.
You answered part of my question when you answered Cardinal George, but the one that I would like to answer is, suppose there's a community, an entire community of Anglicans coming into the Roman Catholic tradition. Supposing there's a member of that, one or two members that don't want to go into the Anglican, keep the Anglican rite, but join the Latin or Roman Catholic rite. Is that possible?
Since every single person who is going to come in as a group has to indicate in writing their intention, they want to become a Catholic, it will only be that element in the congregation, but that will still constitute a congregation. I'm not sure we will ever have 100% agreement when we look to a congregation and say, how many of you want to follow your pastor into the community? Although the couple we've experienced have had, as far as we can determine, an indication that all of them want to come in. But in answer to your question, there will probably be some who will not want to be a part of this. And that remains their choice, but it also puts them in need of finding another home.
Bishop Conlon, followed by Bishop Boland.
Thank you, Cardinal Wuerl. Is there any requirement for our conference to request the establishment of the ordinariate, or at least a pro forma request that we do that?
I believe the language is a consultation, and that's what we're having.
Would there be any benefit to our requesting it?
Well, I think there's always a higher level of support shown when a body says we would like to do this and we would request that you do this.
Would the chair entertain a motion in that?
If the Cardinal would find that helpful,
Helpful.
I think the Cardinal would back me up in the clarification that it's not up to us to decide whether or not this go forward. The Holy Father has decided that. We could certainly, if you would feel a benefit of this body indicating its support of that, which...
If we could do that, and perhaps in an informal manner, often we do that as a conference simply by showing support by applause of a
Sure.
proposal.
Very good. Then I would ask that at some point the...
Sure, perhaps the
chair
conclusion,
could ask
you're
me
right,
to-
Bishop Conlon. Yeah.
Thank you so very much. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. Bishop Boland, followed by Archbishop Sheehan.
Thank you, Your Eminence. I'm just looking for some pastoral direction. I've recently been approached on a kind of a very informal basis by an Anglican bishop who is part of a charismatic renewal group in our diocese, which is, this renewal group is about 80% Catholic and 20% of other faiths. Together with the fact that he wants to become part of the ordinariate, which he's read a lot about, he also has a group of other Anglicans, perhaps part of them or some of this charismatic group, but they're also from other parts of the diocese. And he has requested a spiritual or a space in one of our churches where this group could pray, etc., on maybe a monthly basis. The advice I'm looking for is, should I first direct them to make sure that they've made contact with your ordinariate before I go any further with any of it? I have the impression, just from a brief conversation, he's just waiting around and then he'll make application when he sees this is established and it's up and running.
I have a feeling, Bishop Olin, that that group may not be alone. There may be a number who are waiting to see what actually happens. Is there going to be an ordinariate? And I suspect that once an ordinariate is announced, it may be that the pastoral dilemma will be less evident because they'll now have someplace to go. I think some are just biding their time to see, is this going to happen?
Would it be good for me to advise them to make contact with your office?
If they're at all interested, I would certainly let them know we're welcoming correspondence in any form from any of the groups that are interested.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Archbishop Sheehan, then Archbishop Broglio.
Thank you, Cardinal Wuerl, for your leadership on this important matter. I have a question that relates to something that you mentioned a few moments ago, and that is the relationship between the present pastoral provision arrangement that is under the direction of Archbishop Myers of Newark and the new approach that is being taken, the Anglican ordinariate. Those two are very separate groups, is that correct?
They are, because
Processes.
if someone is already a priest through the pastoral provision, nothing changes there, nothing is touched. If someone wants to come in today as an individual, they can still apply for the pastoral provision. This Anglicanorum Coetibus provision of an ordinariate is intended for groups.
So an Episcopal priest that wanted to simply become a Catholic and take advantage of the pastoral provision, he could still continue on with Archbishop Myers' arrangement there in Newark. Is that correct?
He certainly can.
Okay. And I'm grateful that we're able to provide to this process Father Jeffrey Steenson, who is one of my priests. I ordained him a couple of years ago. He had been, of course, the Episcopal Bishop of New Mexico, became Catholic, and with the pastoral provision, I ordained him a priest. And we're happy to be loaning him to the seminary in Houston to help you and the others on this project.
Archbishop, thank you for your generosity. Thank you very much.
Archbishop Broglio, followed by Bishop Matano.
Your Eminence, thank you for all of your efforts. My question is related to, we have a number of military chaplains who are very much attracted by this whole possibility. They would obviously more logically fall into the category of the pastoral provision, but the interest has been sparked by the possibility of retaining these elements of their own Anglican spirituality and tradition. Is there any space for this category of people? That's one part of my question. The second part is, this is obviously a selfish interest on my part, but if indeed they are part of this group of Anglicans, would they be able to also celebrate in our rite?
Archbishop, that's one of the collateral benefits of this provision. A community that comes in with their priest, or a number of priests who come in as a part of the ordinariate, they are Catholic priests. And so if the neighboring parish says, the neighboring pastor says, I haven't had a vacation in a while because there's no priest I can turn to cover, can you celebrate Mass in the Latin Rite in my parish next week? The answer is, of course, of course. And so I think this might be a benefit to the ordinariate.
I think so. Thank you, Your Eminence.
Thank you, Archbishop. Bishop Matano, then Bishop Farrell.
Thank you, Your Eminence, for making this so possible and realizing the expectation of our Holy Father. I just have a couple of questions, realizing that the Anglican tradition will not be a ritual church, but attached to the Roman Rite. If someone of the Anglican tradition being welcomed into the church marries someone of the Latin Rite, would permissions be needed for that marriage to take place? And does delegation have to be given, as we do for interritual marriages between, say, a Catholic and a Maronite? And then when we have the other sacraments, would they follow a ritual of the Anglican tradition? Like in the extraordinary form, they can have the ritual in the according to the 1962 rituals. Would those rituals also be followed for baptism, for confirmation? And then when it goes to, they can say Mass in the Latin Rite, supposing some of our priests are attracted to the manner of celebration according to the Anglican tradition, because it's under the umbrella of the Roman Rite, can they use that ritual and be able to celebrate Mass according to that? Is it a reciprocal relationship? And then finally, if someone has left, well, just questions that come to mind. If someone has left the Catholic Church and had entered the Anglican Church, but now they are returning back with this tradition, it seems to me that would be a different canonical situation, because one was having left, where this is a community born into that faith. So that would seem to be a special consideration. These are just pastoral considerations that maybe all the answers are not here now, but I think it would be helpful if we knew how to go beyond the actual celebration of Mass into the pastoral applications as it unfolds, because with the extraordinary form, we were focused on the celebration of Mass according to the 1962 Ordo, but as that evolved, then there became requests to celebrate it in all the sacraments, particularly confirmations. Thank you.
Sal, thank you. Thanks for a number of questions. A good number of the aspects of this would be more canonical, I believe, than at this point, than a part of the direct effort of the ordinariate. However, I think it's important to note this is not being established as another rite. So I appreciate your raising that point, because those issues canonically would not be engaged here. This will not be the establishment of a new rite in the church. The question of liturgical usage, my understanding is right now that for the Anglican use parishes and the use of the Book of Divine Worship, that is solely for the celebration of the Eucharistic liturgy. There are not Anglican usage books and rituals for all the other sacraments. And I don't envision that that's envisioned here as well. Some of the other canonical questions you raise, and they're very legitimate ones, I think that's probably going to be on an ad hoc basis once the ordinariate is established. And that's one of the reasons why I mentioned earlier, it would be a great generosity if we were able to make available our tribunals to those individuals who need that assistance. Thank you, Sal.
Bishop Farrell and Bishop Oye.
You already answered, Eminence, part of the question I have, but would it not be helpful, given the fact that we have a number of Anglican priests who wish to become Roman Catholic priests, do not want to be part of the ordinariate? Certainly they can enter through the pastoral provision. However, given the fact that there is this great effort and your committee has done such wonderful work, and we now have a program of intense formation, I believe is the word you used, at St. Mary's Seminary in Houston, could we not just all come together and say, okay, why can't a priest, an Anglican priest who wants to become a Roman Catholic priest, not just enter through the same process? I mean, I understand, but theologically, they're going to be Catholic priests. So you can't just say, well, it's not possible. Because if they're entering through the ordinariate, they're being ordained Roman Catholic priests for Anglican usage. Through the pastoral provision, it is the same thing.
Bishop, I think the logic of your argument is perfect. But the fact is that we have a long-standing tradition of the pastoral provision, and the Holy See, in establishing this provision for group entry, chose not to abolish that. But I think the logic of what you're presenting eventually will probably win out, that it may turn out that the pastoral provision is simply no longer needed. However, that decision has not been made.
Well, in your meetings in Rome, could you not possibly bring that question up again?
I'd be happy to.
Bishop Boyer, Bishop Braxton.
Your Eminence, what will be done when admitting a congregation and members of a congregation? How are you going to handle people in irregular marriages?
This is one of the reasons why I spoke earlier about the need for the availability of tribunals to begin to address what can be regularized, and then there is the pastoral decision about who cannot therefore receive Eucharist. Thank you. Thanks for...
Bishop Braxton and Bishop Herzog.
Thank you, Cardinal Wuerl, for the informative presentation. I have a couple of very simple practical questions, I think. How many people are we currently talking about? How many priests are we talking about at this point, and how many laity? I don't have a sense of that at this point.
We probably will have as many as 100 dossiers on priests to send to Rome. A number of those would be priests who are immediately connected with the community, and some of them are priests who are serving in Anglican chaplaincies and other services. The number of people is very hard to determine because it depends on what will be the final count in each one of these communities. But we've been able to ascertain, what would you say would be? We estimate right now about 2,000 individuals.
And when this ordinariate is established, will one of these priests become the bishop of this ordinariate?
Well, the Holy See will appoint an ordinary, but more than that I can't say. But what happened in England was the Holy See picked from that community, picked from those who were coming into the church who would be the ordinary. It seems that's a logical way to go about it. It would be someone out of that community who would be invited, who would be named the ordinary. Not necessarily made a bishop, because if the person is married and ordained, they would simply be the ordinary with ordinary jurisdiction, but not episcopal ordination.
And then once that is set up, if there is a parish in a particular diocese with an Anglican community and now in the Catholic Church with their liturgical privileges and a ordained Catholic priest, and a Catholic in the neighborhood who's not a part of that at all just wanders in some Sunday and says, this is beautiful, I like this. Are we in a situation where we'd have to tell them, no, you can't go to that church?
Well, pastorally, I suspect that that question might only arise if we determine that it has become a problem, that so many are. And then I think the provision does not The ordinariate does not envision this being a way to attract Roman Catholics to it. But if someone wanders in.
They could wander in. They would be going to a valid Mass,
and they could receive communion, obviously. Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Bishop. Bishop Herzog, and our last will be Archbishop Fiorenza.
Just a practical question. Has there been any practical thought, or will there be, about the relationship with the ordinariate and the communities that belong to it to the local dioceses? You're going to have cross-jurisdictional issues that, if there's not some clarification, I could just foresee a lot of confusion growing up as to what does the local bishop have in this equation.
Part of it, when this was first discussed, part of the image that was used on how these would work together, we have, as was just pointed out earlier by Archbishop Rolio, we have the military archdiocese, the military ordinariate, working all over the world, and priests of that ministering in facilities, and that doesn't seem to cause a jurisdictional problem. I come originally from a part of the world in which we had the Byzantine Ruthenian, the Ukrainian, the Melkite, the Maronite, and they all had separate jurisdictions, including I was the bishop and he was the archbishop in Pittsburgh, and there didn't seem to be real tensions. But some of that, I think, will ameliorate as this unfolds.
Archbishop Fiorenza.
Thank you. Archbishop, Cardinal DiNardo indicated earlier that there's been an Anglican youth parish in Houston for many years, and presently it's under the authority of the Archbishop of Galveston, Houston. If that parish decided that it would like to be under the new ordinariate, could that happen? Could they be released from their bond of love to the Archbishop of Galveston, Houston, and then come under the jurisdiction of the new ordinariate?
They could, with the loving embrace of both archbishops.
Well, of course. So that's possible.
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Thanks, Archbishop. Cardinal Wuerl, you asked for a consultation, and you got it. That was a good one, wasn't it? Those are good questions, and it's a tribute to the thoroughness and the timeliness of the topic that you so eloquently introduced. In response to Bishop Conlon's excellent suggestion, might I ask the House to indicate its support and its encouragement to Cardinal Wuerl in this very timely and promising endeavor?
Thank you. Thank you.